Good evening. I'm Kathy Schultz, Dean of the School of Education.
And I am Arturo Cortez, Assistant Professor of Teacher Learning, Research and Practice, and Learning Sciences and Human Development.
Welcome to
The Future.
It is our pleasure to welcome you to our current set of Ed Talks. We are at number 6, and we are delighted that you are here with us this evening. We've come together to listen to 4 amazing speakers and to spend some time dreaming as we imagine new social and educational futures. To date, faculty, staff, and community members connected to the School of Education at CU Boulder have presented over 24 Ed Talks that have addressed some of today's most pressing issues in education. Through these talks over the past couple of years, we have reimagined our educational system. This act of imagination seems especially relevant in our current moment since we have recently spent the last year and a half adapting more or less successfully to a global pandemic. This evening, we'll be seeing videos of talks from 4 speakers, all faculty in the School of Education, about their visions of the future. During these talks, you can interact with the speakers through the live chat. And after the talks, we'll have about a half hour for Q&A, where we hope to have an engaging discussion with all of you. As the talks progress this evening, you can enter a question into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen at any time. Thank you for joining us as we explore how we can draw on our dreams to create together a more just and equitable future.
Now, specifically, what is our relationship with the future? In some moments, we wait around for it, passively letting its waves wash over us as it transforms into the present, leaving it wake as it escapes into the past. However, in other moments, we dream about it. We yearn for a new future, a new imaginary, and we will it. Indeed, we conjure it into existence. The importance of dreaming a new future cannot be lost in our context of global pandemic, social rebellion, and the expansion of white supremacy through our institutions, as well as the challenge to academic freedom, especially against critical race theory.
Listening to the present opens up possibilities for the future, and dreaming about future possibilities allows us to more deeply understand and experience our current lives. As Janelle Monáe reminded us in the opening song, even when we are dancing free, we are too often bound by the present. We hope the talks today can help free us from the constrictions of the present and propel us to the future.
Indeed, R.D.G. Kelly wrote that freedom and love may be the most revolutionary ideas available to us, and yet we have failed miserably to grapple with their political importance. How do we make love and freedom central in our relationships with the future? How do we position struggle and resistance as practices necessary for growing the fruits of our collective dreams? Again, Janelle sings that broken dreams, no sunshine, endless crimes. We long for freedom, for freedom. You're free, but in your mind, your freedom's in a bind. As humans, it is our vocation to remove ourselves from this bind, to create a new world where our minds, bodies, and relationships are free from oppression. Dreaming is under threat. It is not as free as we once thought. We have to fight for the tools that help us manifest new social worlds that are anchored in love and freedom.
Today's speakers, who are all faculty in our School of Education, give us new tools and practices, images and songs to will new imaginations into existence and to bring about the new worlds and the educational possibilities we all desire. Our first speaker, Jose Ramon Izaraga, also known as Dr. Thembot, is an assistant professor of learning sciences and human development. Their work is inspired by a lifelong pursuit of using art practice, creativity, and emergent digital technologies to resist and transform racism, anti-Blackness, homophobia, and transphobia. Dr. Izaraga designs opportunities for learners to explore multiple versions of themselves in joyful and fantastical learning. Jose and his partner Arturo's greatest claim to fame is that they are parents to celebrity Webby Award nominee Chihuahua RuPaul. Please join me in warmly welcoming Jose.
Hello, I am Dr. Jose Ramon Izaraga, and I am from the future. I am from a future that nobody, including myself, imagined for myself. I am from a future that by many measures was not meant for me as a queer child of poor Mexican immigrants. When I was in 4th grade and started showing some academic promise, my teacher wanted me to dream of being president of the United States. But what I really wanted was to be a school bus driver. Then in high school, when I was in advanced placement and honors classes, my teachers wanted me to dream of being a medical doctor. While what I really wanted was to be the next Frida Kahlo. And when I was getting my PhD, my mentors wanted me to dream of being a professor. But what I really wanted was to be cast in an episode of Star Trek. That last one is a joke, of course. Kind of. I'm sure that as children, we all have had experiences of adults asking us what we wanted to be when we grew up. Or maybe we find ourselves doing the same with our young ones. In schools, we often build learning around these dreams of the future selves of our young people. But these narratives, these imaginings of the future of our young people are often limited by what we want to see for them, and not what they see for themselves. No matter how fantastical, how silly, or how playful these imaginings can be. Playfulness, play, the playful imagination is what has animated much of my work as a researcher of learning and development for young people, specifically youth from Black and Brown communities. Youth who are often pigeonholed as low achieving and deficient. In the fall of 2012, when I was just beginning my doctoral studies, I got one of my first powerful visions of what a space that fosters playful imaginings can do for young people. That fall, I started working with Dr. Glinda Hull, a professor at UC Berkeley, as a program coordinator and researcher in an after-school digital storytelling club called Space to Create. At the core of this program was a customized social network that we created for predominantly Latinx youth in Richmond, California. S28, as we called it, was like a safe Facebook for 3rd through 5th graders where they could connect with other kids their age from all over the world. These kids met a couple of times a week at St. Cornelius Elementary in Richmond, California. In that room, they would work with teachers and peers to create digital movies. They wrote scripts, they filmed, they edited, and did the post-production. They would create these stories and then post them on this safe Facebook site that we created. They could chat with other kids about the videos through this network. One 4th grader I worked with was named Julieta, and her genius was in full display. She created an amazing film about her experiences as an immigrant to the US from El Salvador, and her family's experience in adapting to life in a new country. She connected online with a young Mexican peer in Jalisco, and she showed this very sophisticated way of talking with someone she didn't know. She asked very subtle and far-reaching questions that led to very rapid relationship building with the other child. It was a kind of diplomacy that you don't see often in 4th graders. So not only was her film cool, she was able to connect in ways that even we as adults struggle with. I soon discovered from school staff and administrators that this same child was having issues in her regular school classes, often put in remedial activities for her lack of English proficiency and lack of engagement. So how is it that we could all see two very different versions of the same child, two different versions of Julieta? Through my work with Dr. Hull and Dr. Chris Gutierrez, I came to understand that a child can indeed show their true, authentic genius when a learning environment is saturated with opportunities for a child to do so. Opportunities for a child to play, to build relationships, and to leverage the interests and skills they already possess. As a graduate student and now as a professor, I have found that when teachers and young people have opportunities to co-author side by side, they develop an understanding of how to create shared goals of learning activity. They learn how to unearth and amplify a richness of expertise and talent. They enact academic knowledge in creative ways. This type of playful space is not only important for a child to present a different kind of self than is usually presented, but it's a rich place for teachers to imagine their own developing identities. In a creative space, both can happen at the same time. Instead of teachers observing and learning how to manage students, teachers can get into the playful imagination of a child. And then teachers learn how to use play to design better learning and become better teachers. Central to this type of collective learning is that collective joy, that hope, and that possibility. This makes a rich space of learning for both children and for teachers. This hope and possibility is important in our sociopolitical context. And yes, that is a Trump mask that teacher is wearing on her head. And this is because the teacher was part of a science fiction short film that her and the youth were producing. A film where the former president betrays humanity by joining forces with an alien force. The teacher and youth used cutting-edge filming and editing technology, often learning how to use these tools together side by side. Indeed, developing important digital literacies. And as you can see, even the teacher had a role created for her. In this example, like others in the work that I have done, teachers and youth created stories that are indeed fantastical, but in many ways imagine solutions to everyday problems. It is important to note that the youth seen here are of Mexican and Salvadorian heritage. And during the beginning stages of writing the script for the film, their families were being directly impacted by racist immigration policies. Our youth, alongside the teacher, imagined a solution, albeit with a climax where Trump was sucked into a black hole. This fantastical ending showed hope, possibility, and agency. I also want to note that the teachers and young people did some research on singularities and black holes when devising this ending. Indeed, through the crafting of this fantastical solution of the problem of Trump, the young people were embodying identities as future astrophysicists. The fantastical, as propelled by the playful imagination, can be consequential for the learning and development of not only young people, but of teachers and adults, and even us as researchers. And listen, I may not have become a bus driver, but through my work as a university professor and researcher, I get to drive around, usher learners through powerful learning experiences. And while I did not become the next Frida Kahlo, I use my artistic sensibilities and creativity every day as I co-design learning possibilities with youth and with teachers. And I'm still waiting for that casting call from Star Trek. But I will continue to guide those with whom I work to shoot for the stars, to use their playful imaginations and the fantastical, to dream up new possibilities of a new, just world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Our next speaker, Dr. Kalonji Nzinga, is an assistant professor in learning sciences and human development, and is the new director of the RAP Lab here at CU. As a cultural psychologist, he explores how millennials and post-millennials develop their ethical worldviews, especially how they come to understand moral concepts like authenticity, loyalty, and justice. His research illuminates the polycultural process where young people engage with sacred texts and traditional myths, such as episodes of Law and Order, rap verses, and the comment threads of Twitter posts. From these interactions with ideology, Dr. Nzinga explains young people craft their own hybridized ethical perspectives. Let's welcome Kalonji.
How does language arts capture her heart? When all through the class from the first day it starts, she don't see her language and she don't see her arts. She wonders how the class even got that name when she already figured out the rules of the game. When it comes to her language and her arts, LA stands for make your culture less audible, limited access, keep your lingo absent, because there's something about your dialect that's less articulate. How did she receive this message? Because the teachers never heard of Kendrick. Even though he won a Pulitzer, he hasn't gained a single mention in this curriculum. Rather, she sent a detention for drumming beats on tables in this course, when in her hood of birth, break beats and 808s remain a driving force behind a renaissance of metaphors, behind a rebirth of ghetto shorties channeling traumas, and word of wisdoms from big mamas in the sonnets of poetic verse. But somehow here her poems have a lesser worth. Even though the poems of Nipsey Hussle are streamed at a rate William Wordsworth could never have dreamed, tens of millions of fans, Birmingham to Bethlehem, don't disrupt distinctions between primitive and advanced, between high arts and the low. Rap is forced to sneak in through the back door of modern art museums and institutions, but maybe it's 'cause modern music is viewed in terms of entertainment, not intellectual endeavor, and thus becomes elective always, prerequisite never. It seems that our species may need reorientation. The zebrafinch don't separate music from education. From parent to chick, songs are passed through generations. He learns melodic stylings of his father's variation, paying close attention to the tweets of his father until one day, he's old enough to find a baby mama. The creativity of the tweets in their repertoire are judged by a mate as a proxy for how smart they are. For the zebrafinch, music is a primary lesson. Researchers study their brains with EKG measures and learn that while they're in their nest fast asleep, they're mentally rehearsing the arrangements of their tweets. How do I know whether to marry this zebrafinch? Only if their songs strike delicate equilibrium between conforming to rhythms passed on for millennia and creative interpolations unmatched by anyone. You see, the finch must become both a master of history and a producer of novelty and creativity. But it's not just the finch whose survival depends on transmission of hymns through the generations. In Africa, they call them the griot or the jolly, singing storytellers from Senegal to Mali, a chain of transmission linking artists to their teachers that reaches back even before the period of Jesus. The jolly plays the role of historian, thousand-year genealogies recorded in memory, recited in epic poems, stories, hymns, like the Epic of Sundiata, transmitted from jolly to jolly to jolly, with glory since. The 13th century in vocal performances, preserving historical records, lessons, and common sense. When the king's about to repeat yesterday's mistakes, the jollies who resides at his side warning him. Through her proverbs and lyrics, the past is born again, like the firmament at 5 a.m. Written verse oral can be a false dichotomy. Both coexist within language competency. The speech is the right hand, the text is the left. How else can they emerge cleansed and fresh without washing one another? I want to express caution to my brothers and sisters who subtly recommend amputation of right hands, devaluing skills like verbatim memorization, recitation, stereotypes of primitive incantations lacking sophistication. Are there hierarchies to language arts in Western civilization? With oral genres construed as less intelligent, and even less so when they think it's relevant to pay attention to rhythm and tonality, literary devices of emotion and soul which must be suppressed if objectivity's the goal, the low. Lower I descend into the diaphragm, the more I feel outside the discipline. But many times it's the jolly class, the singers, who play the role of linguistic innovators. Think about the poet Erykah Badu and her collaborator, Georgia Ann Muldrew. 1 month after Obama's inauguration, they released a ballad by the name of Master Teacher, which featured a word that would become eventually extensively cemented in cultural memory. But before this adjective was in a million Twitter tweets, it was chanted in a hypnotic ascending melody. I stay woke 44 times. I stay woke, a pledge for Black folk. I stay woke, I know Obama's president, but I stay woke. I hear colorblind rhetoric, but I stay woke. Does the invention of the word woke make Erica a jolly, dispersing new language through songs and stories? In Bambara language, jolly has a dual meaning. It also means blood because the storyteller is streaming through society like blood courses through the body, the circulation of information in the form of stories. They could either circulate pathogenic illness or community nutrients, intelligence, and wellness. Within a year of the release of the album, you hear woke spoke from grocery store aisle 1 to loud grunts in barbershops. Lingo passed around blunts by shorties with gold fronts and halter tops. A proverb that eloquently summed it up and sounded eerily similar to prayers that were sung to us as younger guys, as we were bounced on our mother's thighs, as she spoke to us through tear-flooded eyes. May you be protected from the devious lullabies, wooing you to slumber in nationalist mythologies and culturally hegemonic ideologies that have long served to normalize inequality. Stay woke. How does language arts capture her heart? When white language styles define what is smart, when a teacher claims to be woke, but he won't even chart the origin of that term back to its start. How does she not feel a wave of frustration when Erykah Badu receives no citations? When On the Dead homies No Cap and Gang Gang are dismissed in this class under the label of slang? When she's almost sure that each of these sayings are the most descriptive vocab she's found to explain heartfelt divinity and loyalty claims, slang. A label so often applied to her dialect, she wonders from whence it came. How far back does this word slang originate? It's hard to settle on a specific date. Was it the late 19th century when slang was prohibited from the Oxford English Dictionary? Or before in 1756, when slang was defined by Oxford English as the language that is suitable for the low and disreputable? The language that is suitable for the low and disreputable. We are the people on the low. Yes, them's facts. But our reputations, we would like to take them back. We are confused why you so casually use low income as a synonym for low impact. There's 1.6 million words on Urban Dictionary that have meanings whether or not you heard them. The meaning of this verbiage, the significance of its worthiness is not derived from them, possessing Latin origins. How can language arts capture her heart? When she starts to see her language and see her arts. When we, the educators from the global South, show that we cherish expressions from the mouths of our fellow Southerners, and we build classrooms that respect and treasure her. Connection to oral traditions, when youngins have chances to communicate in the genres that indigenously germinate and sprout in the valleys that they call home, so they can harvest the sacred poems, proverbs, stories, and vernaculars cultivated by dusty-foot philosophers. For me, this is students learning hip-hop verse, but for you, this may be putting another dialect first. Both are means for young jollies to mold their own voice while sampling stories formerly told, using linguistic tools to carry out their own goals, reimagining their communities, identities, and roles. Bring on the future where we cease the norm of seeing written versus oral as either ors. Instead, we should weave in between the forms and even bring music back into the core as a fundamental element of communication. Neither the jolly nor the finch separate music from education. We must expand our notion of writing utensils as not just Microsoft Word, paper, and pencils, but microphones and digital audio workstations. So youth become editors of letters and vibrations. And LA stops standing for linguistic assimilation, and instead, low frequency amplification, turning up the basin, keeping language arts on the low.
Thank you so much, Kalonji. Our next speaker is Joe Pullman. Dr. Joe Pullman is a professor of learning sciences and human development and associate dean for research in our School of Education. Joe has always loved learning, and he couldn't believe his luck when he found out 30 years ago that he could pursue a doctorate in what was then the new field of learning sciences. He was the first class in that program, the first in the field. Throughout his career, Joe has worked with colleagues to design interdisciplinary learning environments that simultaneously encourage deep engagement and support young people in learning how to use powerful ways of thinking, doing, and being to make a difference in their communities. He's long been interested in how to combine art and science through stories and data. Please join me in welcoming Joe.
It's 1982. This is me, and this is my mom. To my 16-year-old self, my mom is a force to be reckoned with, a driven, stubborn, smart, registered nurse and mother of 5 children. But at this moment, mom is standing in the kitchen, screaming out her frustration and agony. She's just gone through the painful process of quitting smoking. Maybe this 3rd time will be the charm, but right now, all she knows is that she's dying for a cigarette. I'm in the 10th grade, working on a school research essay, and as you can see, growing my hair. Not coincidentally, I decided to write about the dangers of smoking. Mind you, I'm a good student. I researched the topic using state-of-the-art information technology of the day, primarily what I can find through the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature at the library. For those of you who don't know, this was how students did research back in the 80s. All I could find back then were secondhand sources in print newspapers and magazines. I concluded that there were clearly severe health risks to tobacco smoking, specifically lung cancer. I also concluded we didn't know whether nicotine was addictive and secondhand smoke was dangerous. But the tobacco companies knew. They strategically created doubt and deliberately kept the negative research results on nicotine and smoking from reaching the public, including my mom and me. Mom did quit smoking in 1982. By then, a bold New York Times article stated that nicotine is as addictive as heroin, cocaine, or amphetamines. No kidding, that matched what I'd seen my mom going through. 5 years later, she died from complications of metastasized cancer in her lungs. 2 years after her death, a tobacco company CEO testified under oath to Congress, "I do not believe that nicotine is addictive." I tell this story in part to shame such liars and to honor the memory of my dear mother, but I also do so to draw lessons for today and for the future. Fast forward to the 21st century. The Reader's Guide Index is a relic of the past. We live in a globally internetworked world. Knowledge is exploding. Today's students have access to exponentially growing digital information and data through the web. Professional and governmental organizations put out consensus reports and data sets that are free and open for use by the public. We thought in the 1990s that all we had to do was set information free, but that's not all it takes to get the whole story. You see, in 2021, we are in what some people have called the misinformation age. Companies and politicians have learned from the strategies developed by the tobacco industry and are even more aggressively pushing propaganda. Truthiness trumps facts. False ideas spread like wildfire over social media, thanks to algorithms that deliberately manipulate people. In the last year, we've seen the logical conclusion of these trends. Fake news run amok has contributed to hundreds of thousands of deaths from a global pandemic. Deliberate misinformation led to a deadly insurrection on the United States Capitol, seeking to overturn the results of an election. It is literally a life and death situation, both for individuals in our society and for our democracy. So, What are we going to do about it? What we need is improved information literacy and data literacy. For the past 12 years, my colleagues and I have been working on this. We're trying to educate young people to be data detectives who interrupt and mitigate the damage of fake news. In 2009, our group of university researchers and educators at schools started a project to teach STEM literacy through journalism. Our programs eventually involved 75 teachers and over 100,000 students in 4 states who worked out of newsrooms in schools and after-school programs. We co-designed a curriculum where high school and middle school students could explore contentious topics like climate change, fracking, mental health issues, food and product safety, the proliferation of prisons, and gun violence. Let me tell you about one of them to illustrate how it worked. Chelsea was a high school student in Colorado taking a class called data literacy. She considered herself an environmentalist and was concerned about climate change. She'd been hearing it led to more frequent and intense natural disasters. So she researched the topic and then pitched to her fellow students and her teacher the idea for a story about the influence of climate change on hurricanes. Her story was okayed, and she looked for multiple credible sources. With the help of a professional science journalist and her teacher, she found good data and information from NOAA and NASA. She assembled her data and created a draft infographic. She presented and defended her conclusions to her peers and teacher. She revised multiple times before finally publishing her findings in an online news magazine. Everything Chelsea had read in liberal environmentalist sources told her that natural disasters like hurricanes were increasing because of climate change. As some cognitive scientists have put it, she began with a knowledge illusion. She was certain she'd find what people like her generally believed, whether that be liberal dogma or conservative dogma. But after weeks poring over data and reports, she'd come to an uneasy conclusion. Although it's possible that climate change may have something to do with hurricane frequency or intensity, we lack observational data to truly prove anything. At a public poster session sponsored by her school, Chelsea was essentially accused of being a climate change denier. That was just what she feared. She held her ground, though, explaining that the theories linking climate change to hurricane frequency and intensity were sound, but it mattered that the long-term data were not yet scientifically adequate. Because of our ideological polarization on climate change, Chelsea was making a bold, important stand. She'd learned where the strong evidence for climate change was and where the weaker evidence was. She believed of the value of living in harmony with our environment by doing what we can to combat human causes of climate change. But she wanted to respect what she'd learned about rigorous scientific methods. This meant she wasn't willing to go beyond the evidence on one small part of the debate just to bolster her position. She was becoming the kind of person I'd like to have participating in our democratic debates and decisions. Fake news, as we've seen, as I learned with my mom, can be a matter of life and death. We desperately need more people to become like Chelsea, people who understand that their judgments are influenced by knowledge illusions and their empathy for others who look and sound most like them. People who recognize their own bias and commit to being critical information consumers and producers. As educators for the future, we need to create the tools for our students to go beyond fake news and find the bigger picture. The health and life of each of us, of our democracies, and of our planet depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Our next speaker, Dr. Stephanie R Toliver, is an assistant professor of literacy and secondary humanities. Informed by her love of science fiction and fantasy texts, as well as her experience as a 9th and 10th grade English teacher, Dr. Toliver's scholarship centers the freedom dreams of Black youth and honors the historical legacy that Black imaginations have had and will have on activism and social change. Specifically, she focuses on representations of and responses to Black youth in speculative fiction texts to discuss the implications of erasing Black children from futuristic and imaginative contexts. In addition, she assists teachers in imagining how classrooms can use speculative fiction as a means to center Black joy and Black dreams. Let's welcome Stephanie.
When I was a little girl, I learned that a dream was a wish the heart makes when we're fast asleep. I believed in that description, believed that dreams only occurred during sleep, that dreams could never be a part of reality. And then I started learning about my history. I learned that Harriet Tubman, a leading abolitionist who constantly risked her life to ensure that hundreds of enslaved people were able to experience freedom, uttered the following words as she lay on her deathbed: "I go to prepare a place for you." I saw how my ancestor, as she took her last breaths, dreamed of a future, how she was formulating a plan for future freedoms. I learned about Frances E.W. Harper, a suffragist, poet, teacher, and organizer. I read some of her anti-slavery literature and her poem, "Bury Me in a Free Land," which uses vivid imagery and metaphor to discuss the oppression of enslaved people and to imagine a future land where Black people are free. She too was imagining worlds of the future, worlds of freedom where Black folks are able to sleep, to rest, to enjoy life beyond mental, physical, and emotional enslavement. I learned about Coretta Scott King, an author, activist, civil rights leader, and sci-fi reader. I learned about how early in her courtship, she sent Martin Luther King a science fiction book written by Edward Bellamy called Looking Backward, 2000 to 1887. Now, you may have never heard of this book because it was published in 1888, but in it, the main character falls asleep in the 19th century and wakes up in a 21st century socialist utopia. All people are free and equal, individualism has given way to collective humanism, and hierarchy and oppression are eliminated. Inside Bellamy's book, Coretta wrote the following message: "I shall be interested to know your reactions to Bellamy's predictions about our future." With this message, Scott King foregrounded future vision, dreaming, as essential to promoting social justice for all. She was dreaming of just futures and wanted Martin Luther King to dream alongside her. Reading about Black women helped me reconsider the idea that dreams only happen when we're sleeping, because I noticed that Black women are constantly dreaming and wishing while we're awake. Throughout our lives, on our deathbeds, in our writing, in our relationships, in our activist work, dreaming is and has always been centered. We dream of freedom, we dream of joy, we dream of Afrofutures. We dream of preparing places and spaces where Black folks can be well. But it's not just Black women, though. Black girls are also dreaming, all the time. Walk with me as I tell you about a few. In 1914, at 17 years old, Amy Ashwood Garvey co-founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, an influential anti-colonial movement that centered the advancement of Black people across the African diaspora. On March 2nd, 1955, 9 months before the widely known Rosa Parks incident, Claudette Colvin was arrested at the age of 15 for challenging bus segregation and refusing to give up her seat to a white woman on a crowded bus. In 1967, Tarika Lewis, then a 16-year-old high school student, became the first sister to join the Black Panther Party. This feat came after she'd co-founded a Black student union and staged sit-ins to demand the inclusion of a Black Studies course and a Black History club at her high school. In the spring of 2015, Ziana Bryant wrote a petition to the city of Charlottesville, Virginia, that called for the removal of Robert E. Lee's statue and a renaming of Robert E. Lee Park. She was 15 years old. In 2017, 10-year-old Karis Rogers started a clothing line, Flexin' in My Complexion, to inspire Black girls to be comfortable in their skin after she was bullied for her dark skin. On March 14th, 2018, 12-year-old Naomi Wadler organized a walkout of 60 classmates at her elementary school. Days later, she became the youngest speaker at the March for Our Lives rally to advocate for Black female victims of gun violence in the United States. As you can see, throughout time, Black girls work towards the creation of an anti-oppressionist world. They dream of futures where racist statues, gun violence, and anti-Black policies are eradicated. They imagine worlds where Black girls are celebrated and Black youth and Black communities matter. Like Coretta Scott King, these girls are dreaming of just futures and begging us to dream alongside them. When I was a doctoral student engaging in my dissertation research, I also saw Black girls dreaming. It was the summer of 2019, and I was facilitating an Afrofuturist writing workshop for 6 Black adolescent girls. The goal was for each person, including me, to write a speculative fiction story by the end of our time together. In each of our meetings, we discussed story elements like plot, character, and conflict. We read excerpts from Black speculative stories like Orleans by Sherry Smith and Mother of the Sea by Zetta Elliott. We centered writing tasks from Jewel Parker Rhodes' book on fiction lessons for Black authors that asked us to write about what we know, what we remember, and what we reimagine. And we used each of these components to think through the writing of our own speculative short stories. Throughout this workshop, I saw how Black girls used their pens to author their freedom dreams. Amber dreamed a world in which Black girls act against injustice in various ways, including nonviolence and physical altercations. Both Bailey and Tara imagined worlds where the community is vital to the survival of the individual, eschewing this individualistic, capitalistic narrative often promoted in our society. Victoria and Avenage dreamed of worlds where people listened to Black women and girls, a world where we could use our creativity and wit to solve problems, and people actually listened. Talon imagined a world where Black girls are protected, where we could expel our magic for protection if needed. Collectively, the girls used vivid imagery and metaphor to imagine futures and worlds where Black girls are free. They used their imaginations to dream otherwise, creating new futures and new worlds that drastically differ from our current reality. When I dream of educational Afrofutures, I see Black girls in schools who are not forced to minimize their genius because the teachers can't handle their prodigious, wide-ranging intellect. I see teachers who uplift Black girlhood in the classroom, not just during the month of February and not just when our names are transformed into hashtags, but throughout the school year. I see schooling spaces that protect Black girls from the violence of spirit murder that occurs each time a Black girl is pushed out, pushed away, or pushed aside. I see Black girls using their creativity and wit to set the record straight in a crooked system without feeling as though they will be penalized for telling the truth. I see Black girls being able to flex in their complexion, in their brilliance, in their ancestry. This is not the world we have, but it's one we can build. We can turn this dream into reality and ensure that it's not something that only resides in realms we create while we are asleep. I discuss these dreams, those of my Black female ancestors, those of Black girls I've never met, and those of Black girls I've worked closely with, because the Afrofuture does not exist in a vacuum, in a non-historical void. My dream exists alongside the dreams of those who are named here and those whose names I don't have the room to mention. I honor these women and girls, and I outline aspects of their dreams because they give me a reason to continue dreaming. The dreams of my ancestors prepared space for me to imagine. The dreams of Black girls push me to continue creating spaces where Black girls in the present and in the future will be able to sleep, to rest, to enjoy life beyond the mental, physical, and emotional violence that enacted upon them in a society that praises their content but despises their existence. My ancestors dreamed the Black present into being, and now it's my turn, our turn, to dream multiple futures into existence. I dream of Afrofutures, of educational spaces where Black girls and all Black youth can be well. And, as you can see, I do not dream alone.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your talk and for your dreams. Please join me in thanking all of our fabulous speakers. I continue to be inspired by all of your dreams and what they portend for the future. Now is the question and answer portion of our program. Please write your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and Arturo and I will take turns reading the questions for our panelists who will all join us now. So I will start with the first question, which is directed to Joe. Joe, I'm curious about your thoughts on making digital literacy, media literacy, a component of the core curriculum.
Sorry, everybody. There was a lag for those of us who just joined, Kathy. So Joe might have not heard your question.
So thank you, I say. So the first question is to Joe from Aisha Jackson. Thank you, Aisha, for doing the first question. Joe, I'm curious about your thoughts about making digital literacy and media literacy a component of the core curriculum.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So I think working towards that is a wonderful goal. And I'd like to see us both working towards that and working to integrate digital literacies and information literacies more in existing, the current core curriculum courses. And I also think that there's a lot of consequentiality to how digital and information literacy work gets done, that if we lean on some of the common ways that it's done today, like teaching people little acronyms of rules to follow, that's not going to be as powerful as these personally and community consequential ideas like in the example story I told. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Joe. This is a question for Stephanie. When was the first time you questioned your dreams due to the lack of representation of needs of those you like? And what was the spark that encouraged you to fight to get your dreams back and foster that in others? And that's from Erin Combs.
So for a long time, I didn't question. I just thought we weren't there. And it's a horrible position to kind of put yourself in, but it was kind of where I was. It was like, well, you know, Black people get shot every day. We may not make it to the future. It's not something that's guaranteed to us. So maybe that's why we're not in these futuristic stories. I thought we weren't writing them. We weren't dreaming collectively. We weren't doing this imaginative work. And then it was in college and I found an Octavia Butler novel. And I shouldn't have thought that it was this new novel, but I did. Like, I thought it was something, I was like, oh my gosh, this new author is out here doing work. Like, I'm so excited about this work that's happening. It's new and it's vibrant, and it's amazing. And then like, you look at the copyright date and it was like 1994. And I was like, oh, okay. Like this was like 2 decades ago. And I'm just now figuring this out. And I think that's the time when I was just like, well, why, like what happened here? Why throughout, like everyone knew, like I loved sci-fi things, like sci-fi and fantasy were my things and I wanted to read it all the time. It was the request I consistently made of my teachers, but that just wasn't the stories that I was given, right? So like, where were these stories? Why weren't these stories being offered to me? And I understand, like I do this work. And so I understand there weren't that many like young adult, middle grade, speculative stories with Black girls in them, but there were some. Virginia Hamilton was out there doing work. Where were those stories for me? And so it was one of those things that after I found Octavia Butler and started doing some digging, then I started realizing that there were people that were out there doing this work and no one thought to bring those stories to me, to help me dream alongside them. And so from there, I started to think about like, what can I do to make sure that other Black girls who are wanting these dreams, who are wanting to see themselves in the future, who are wanting to, I don't know, slay some dragons, like, or just have magic. Like the girls who want to see that, like, I want to make sure that they have access to these things. And not just access to the stories that are already written, but like that they know that they can write them too. And they can write them now, not wait till they're adults and can get the big publishing deals. They can do it right now. And so that's kind of where I'm at now.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Our next question is for Dr. Nzinga. How have you seen interest in language arts increase for those who are able to see themselves in the literacies of rap and Black oral histories? And what pushback have you seen from those who haven't yet accepted the breadth of language in academia?
Wow, great question. It makes me really think of someone that I grew up learning a lot from, who's like the rapper Nasir Jones, and he, I think, is one of the greatest storytellers of our time. And I think one of the things that I wanted to kind of get across in the talk was basically a message that I heard from Nas. I heard from, even people growing up in my community, that, our vernacular matters, our vernacular is sacred, our vernacular is brilliant. And so like being able to hear that and know that, like that was never a question. Like if anyone is a hip hop fan, and participated within that language arts genre, it was well known that Nas was a genius. It was well known that the storytelling genre of hip hop had this intellectual rigor, et cetera. But schools was a place where that was not necessarily always let in. It wasn't always appreciated, valued. I think value is probably the best word. And so, yeah, I think in many ways that shifting due to various movements of Black folks, of folks of color. I think of Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. I think of other academics that have influenced me to believe like, oh, not only is this intelligent, which is something that I knew, but this is something that is academic and that it is something that could have a place in academia. And so I, like, for example, Nas was someone that actually dropped out of school because his father actually coached him to do that. Like actually his father told him and his brother, if you want to save yourself, drop out of school and educate yourself. And you could see 30 years later, this dropout poet, amazing storyteller, now has a fellowship at Harvard in his name. And so I think that like it's a tense question, because you are seeing many ways in which hip hop is sort of breaking in the back door. But I do think that it's still an upwards battle of like a larger sort of cultural question of what do we value, who do we value, and whose cultural products do we value.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nzinga. So this is a broad question to all four of our panelists. Much of the talks tonight have focused on creativity, music, video, writing. How can we better incorporate creativity into our day-to-day curriculum in order to build those skills? Do you see more opportunities for that in the future, since the arts tend to be the first cut when funding is challenged or changed? We can also think about this in the context of K-12 spaces. How do we support educators in thinking about the role of the arts? And we'll go in the order of our speakers. We'll start with Jose.
That's a wonderful question. You know, one of the primary tensions that I encounter even in my own elementary education and courses is that there's a compartmentalizing that happens around the arts and creativity in terms of it being something that is only explored in art classes or in after school spaces. And you know, with the challenge of COVID and trying to do a lot of our practicum virtually, we've actually had to lean on creativity and art practice in order for everyday types of explorations around learning for them to feel meaningful and exciting to our young people. And so I think one of the primary things that I've been trying to do in my own working with elementary, or rather working with student teachers, is to rupture where creativity and art practice can happen. And I think a lot of our colleagues today in today's presentations have helped us or have offered some models in terms of how we do that, not only within language arts and the humanities, but also in STEM. And so I think there is possibility. I think there just has to be some rupturing in terms of where creativity and artistic practice can happen.
Dr. Nzinga.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the first thing when I think of is like this panel. I mean, when we start to think about what does creativity look like in schools and what it could look like, I think, you know, like by the end of these four speakers, I was literally like in tears on Stephanie's part. Like it was like just the cumulative, like it was based in this idea that creativity matters and that we can create a future. I think one of the things that when it comes to creating spaces that have creativity, that I think one, we have to realize that there are forces that don't want people to be creative. Like I think that's it's very important for us to understand that it's not just a neutral sort of system that is you know, perhaps just doesn't value creativity, but creativity is like the ability to sort of change circumstances, to change systems that in many ways have not been created for everyday people. For, you know, I've been using this idea of people on the low. And so, yeah, I think just even tying to Joe's idea about fake news, you know, just realizing the amount of, how would I say, double speak, the amount of ideological trickery that exists within school that is meant to, in many ways, make us more docile, make us okay with the way in which our society exists. And I think that, you know, again, with, you know, this idea of fake news, when we hear words like cancel culture, when we hear words like the way that the word woke has been warped, to talk about like woke warriors, the way that, you know, all of these, the ideology that sort of exists underneath many of our schools, in many ways is meant to sort of compress, oppress, etc.
I'll keep building. This reminds me that one of the things that it makes sense, most of us are educators who work in formal schools, and I assume many of the people here with us today are as well. And we also need to think about what kind of informal learning is happening outside of schools. And all of us are doing things both inside of school, formal schools, and outside of formal schools. And I think one of the implicit things in our talking about education for the future is making whatever the future schools are less like what we imagine schools to be now. And part of that relates to interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, where these school curriculum silos that we tend to think in rule too much. And I think people doing things and doing projects that matter to them in groups and tied to community organizations and initiatives, that's the future. And as long as you're doing that, and people are trying to work on not just making sense of things, but creating expressive artifacts like many of the ones we talked about today, then the arts has a natural place. When you're trying to do convincing expression to bring people over to your view in reaction to what's going on in the world, then you're doing creative expression. You know, we all worked really hard to incorporate stories and research in what we presented today. And so there's an artfulness and an empirical side to that. So I just hope we can all continue to do that.
I loved how you ended on stories, mainly because that's what I work with and that's what I'm like passionate about. And I think about the fact that the girls, for instance, that I worked with, and some of the people that I've just known across time, my students, when I was like teaching in high school spaces, they were already doing the creative work that we are, for some reasons, trying to figure out in our classrooms. Like, I remember one of my girls that I worked with at a nonprofit writing center, she was talking about how she's like, oh yeah, me and my friend wrote stories all the time. We don't write them in school though. And I'm just like, cool, like you were already cultivating these things, like you didn't need us. Like, yeah, we can help with grammar, or maybe we can talk about story structure if they want to. But some of the things that we are consistently trying to struggle to bring into curriculum, the students are already doing, but we don't listen. We don't listen to what they have to say. We don't listen to the dreams that they have for their curriculum and for their education. It's kind of like this, well, what can we do up here on high as adults to bring down to these children who need to learn from us? And the things that I think that we have to consider is the fact that like they're already doing this creative work. Some of it may look like the creative things that we know, maybe it's story, maybe it's a song, maybe it's something like that. And then some are doing things that are completely innovative that we have never seen before. But we have to make space for that to occur in our classrooms, and can't think that we are the be all end all of knowledge and are the be all and end all of what creativity can be and what it can mean in our classroom spaces. And so when I think about how we can bring in creativity into our curriculum, some people just got to move out of the way and let kids do what they do. Sometimes like we can help to cultivate, and we have to learn about who they are. We have to care enough to learn about who they are, to learn about the creative things that they're already doing, the creative ways that they're thinking. And sometimes it's even a reconfiguration of what creativity can mean. Like I think about what Walida Imarisha talks about speculative, like what does it mean for speculative fiction? And she says, like, anytime we dream of a better world, if we dream of, I don't know, better roads, that's speculative fiction, because you're dreaming of something that has not yet happened. That is a creative process, to dream of things that are not yet here. And so if we consider like that as a way of being creative too, then we can really expand how we're engaging in this work in our classroom spaces. And so I guess for me, like I said, it's sometimes moving out of the way, it's honoring the students who are in our classroom, it's really reconsidering who holds the knowledge of what creativity is and can mean. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking in this moment.
This is not a final question, rather. We have two more questions, rather. Jose, you mentioned that statistically you shouldn't or wouldn't be where you are today, but for a few important opportunities. Can you do one last connect the dots of how digital literacies can influence the people like you to end up with the opportunities that led you to where you are today?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. You know, the digital has played such an important role in my own development as a person, and even the path that I was able to carve for myself, right? I mean, I met Arturo through Facebook. I met, you know, there's a lot of on a kind of on a more general level, how the digital has helped mediate some of those connections and opportunities. But I think I want to build on something that Dr. Toliver was saying earlier around leveraging the everyday, right? And we exist in a world right now. There's opportunities for us to tap into the everyday resistance and narrative building that our young people are doing, either via TikTok or you know, it seems like every 4 years there's a new thing. Young people don't use Facebook anymore, and they used to use Snapchat. They don't use that anymore. And so we have to almost adapt to the developing digital ecologies of our young people to not only see what they are imagining, but find ways that we can leverage those in how we design for learning. And in this sense, find ways to inject the possibilities of what is possible in those ways. You know, as you can see from my work that I've done and the work that Arturo and I did this past summer with the critical digital pedagogy class, it is that everydayness that we need to be able to leverage, and then these narratives around what is possible can be co-constructed and co-developed. I hope that helps answer your question. Who asked that question, by the way? Sorry.
Valerie.
Valerie Otero.
Valerie, thank you, Dr. Otero, for that question.
So we sadly have to come to an end, and here's a final question for everyone. And we just want you to confine it to one sentence. I know that's impossible. So if there was a message you could send into the future, what would it be, and what would it say, and how would you say it? Jose, since you're on the spot, do you want to go first?
Oh my goodness. What would be a message that I keep thinking about the I don't know if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, but when they bring out the picture of like when you're a kid and they say, what would you say to your future self? I feel that, oh my goodness. Lean into the discomfort of what is not yet here, and let that rupture all of the what you think is normal and what you think is possible.
Perfect. Thank you for being the first one. Kalandri, do you want to try it?
Sure. I think I would say free all political prisoners. We are currently living in a carceral state. We are the leading imprisoner of people in the world. No country imprisons people at the rate of the United States, and we have done so by over incarcerating African-American Black people at 5 times the rate of their white counterparts. And so I would say free all political prisoners.
Speak. Thank you. Joe?
That's hard to follow. What I've come up with is, let's imagine who we want to be and how we want to live together in community, and demand that we take steps to move in that direction and start living that future.
Thank you. And Stephanie, we want to end with your dreams.
I guess this will be a statement to my future self. You've searched for your mother's gardens for your entire life. I hope you found them.
So thank you to all of you. Thank you to everyone who made this possible. Thank you especially to Andy O'Connor, who's extraordinary at bringing these productions together, to Grace Maniscalco, Hannah Fletcher, and Ichigo Takikawa, who were magicians with the logistics, to Kat Miller, the videographer, and Tom Parkin, the video editor, and to all of those, to those of you who hold space for these fabulous speakers and their dreams and visions. We present these Ed Talks twice a year and anticipate holding them next in person next fall. So we look forward to seeing all of you there.
Let's give a final round of applause for our speakers in the chat. Please blow it up. And for all the folks who have helped put on these Ed Talks tonight, and especially you, our dear audience and community, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Shoot for the stars.
Exactly.